Hey everybody, Anna Sabramwoods here, your interactive storytelling coach. Today's session I'm going to talk about 2 tools that you can use to craft your own interactive stories, because I don't want anybody to think that technology is getting in the way of you crafting an interactive story. Absolutely not. So first off, before I get into the 2 tools, one of them you may have already heard of. It's totally cool. The other one might be new to you. I just don't want this to be a secret, because I hear people tell me every single day, Anna, if I only had the tools, then I could craft a great interactive story that moves people to action, that gets people excited about the learning that's coming up. And I say to that, my friends, have you ever heard a writer say, I could write a great story if I only had a better pen. If I only had a better pen, then I could write a better story. Now, if you said that, I'd be like, really? You could write, realistically, you could use a pencil, right? So I think some of that is actual procrastination. And we're just telling ourselves that we need some sort of a unattainable thing to make it possible for us to craft something meaningful for ourselves. Just saying, all right? So, and it's kind of cool. Listen, one of the things that I know about interactive stories, and let me just get into a little bit about what interactive stories are. And by the way, what I love is, hold on, let me just make sure I'm bringing up my, here we go, there, okay. Hey, Marie Pierre is here, Anne-Marie is here. We've got some hyphenated names in the house, and we've got Jessica. Hi, Jessica. Ladies, thanks so much for being here and saying hello. All right, so this is the thing. I know people in my interactive storytelling program, some of them are freelancers, some of them are just getting started with doing this this interactive storytelling thing on their own. And some of them are, getting an Articulate license, right? Because our community builds in Storyline. Costs about $1,000, right? So yeah, it's an investment in you, totally cool. And not everybody can afford it, but some people can justify it because they know that this is going to be their tool of choice and they're going to be investing in that in themselves. It's like saying, how could I make a painting if I'm not going to buy any paint? That's kind of how it works, right? But there's tools out there that are free that you can use, but I'm going to tell you what they are, because I don't ever want you to think that interactive storytelling has anything to do with tools. In fact, it has the opposite. I don't care what you have, I don't care what tool you have, how many developers out there, if you could have a team of 10 people building in 10 different tools. If your story sucks, it's not contextual, and it doesn't give the end user enough connection with the character and agency to move them to something, I don't care if it's done in VR, it will not make a difference, because you have to get people to emotionally connect. And you do that through story, character development, and giving people power to make decisions that they feel are actually meaningful. So none of that is tools. So when I talk to people, sometimes I'll be like, okay, so tell me about your projects. What are you doing right now? What are you struggling with? And they're like, it's the tool. If I just had the better tool. And I'm like, well, I've seen people do awesome stuff with PowerPoint. So it's not the tool. And if you're telling yourself it's the tool, you're giving yourself this little barrier to what will be the check mark that will allow you to move forward. And I guarantee you, if you had the tool tomorrow, it still would take time for you to craft an interactive story, and then you'd come up with something else that would get in the way. So I don't want anything to get in the way. So there's 2 tools I recommend. If you actually need this, if you don't have Articulate Storyline, because the thing is, with interactive stories, your goal is not to create a sim, right? You're not creating some sort of simulation where you have 50 branches. That's not the point. The point of an interactive story, and I've got a couple of examples on my webinar, which you can check out for free actually, and it's super awesome. It's a 2-hour masterclass basically. It's at elearningsecrets.com. So go check it out there if this is something you want to learn more about. But one of the things that happens is an interactive story is really meant to get you from a state of cold unawareness. You don't know you need something, you're perfectly fine in your world, everything's working out fine, You don't need this training. You've already done it. You're cool. Also, the people who take this training are probably already extroverts and they're great at sales. So it's not you. That's fine. It won't work for you. You get people from that state. And the goal of your interactive story is to take them through a journey where they're making some decisions, they're getting some ahas, and they're going, wait a minute, you're selling them on a future that could be theirs if they only take you up on this journey, which is reach out to the mentor, go into the LMS and access all these resources, watch this next tutorial, download this PDF that has the instructions, reach out to this coach, right? All those things. So the interactive story is not supposed to be super complicated. It's supposed to take you on a journey. Now, storytelling is not complicated, but there is nuances. There is context that you have to get. Because if you're trying to connect with a single person, and that's really what your interactive story is about, is connecting with a single person and getting them to make that switch, see the world a little bit differently, create awareness in the fact that their world isn't what they think, or they could be doing things better. That's what's really, really important. So it doesn't need to be super complicated. So as far as I'm concerned, you could go very, very, very far with just Google Doc, because you're writing out basically a script for a story with interactivity built in, and then you take that and you can build it into your software. So a lot of people, what they do is they'll go through the development of iterating through that story, building it out, and by the time they've got something really solid in that software, that's when they can start actually, or when they have something really solid in that document, then they can move into development. And it's not a storyboard in the way that you guys think storyboards in the instructional design world work. They're not. Basically what happens is that's just enough to get you to the stage where you can start prototyping your piece, because you are going to iterate on it, because that experience, there's a nuance, there's a pace to some stories. Sometimes you got to speed it up, sometimes you got to slow it down, and you won't even really be able to feel that until you experience it in the software. So you're doing interaction design plus story design, and they kind of influence each other. It's a really cool thing. Anyways, so two of my favorite tools that you can use for free, which, like I said, if you really want to and you want to build something to see how it flows, Twine, which is at twinery.org, I think. You can use that tool. You have to learn how to use it as well. But I actually got a message from somebody the other day, and they said, hey, I'm going to get an interactive storytelling once I learn that tool. And I'm like, okay, you're setting up a gateway for yourself. You don't need to learn Twine to be able to craft a great interactive story. You can collaborate with other people who know how to use that tool, but don't let that be your hang-up. The other one I suggest is Inklewriter. Inklewriter is used by people who they're actually game developers. So they craft their story, they craft their decision, they make up, they decide what it's going to do. And then what happens is they plan the interactivity in Inklewriter, right? Hopefully you guys can find that. I'll put the links underneath the video. And then what happens is after they've got it mapped out there, then what they can do is they can then decide how many visuals, what the narration is going to be, how that's going to unfold. Because when you transition text to interactive medium that gives the user agency, you can't just plop it in. And that's what we've been doing for years, right? That's what e-learning's been for years. You take a bunch of static content, you dump it in someplace, and you think that just adding the next button is actually going to make it an engaging experience. While really, especially when you're crafting something where the user is in charge of that pace and how the story unfolds, there's nuances there and you got to work with it. So what's cool is Inklewriter will give you the opportunity to see, is my pace too fast? Am I giving away too much too soon? And am I too wordy? Are these choices, do they feel like there's good decision pacing happening? Am I going on too long in this monologue, setting up this situation, and they're just going, oh, next, when do I get to make a decision? Because that's part of what our users think is, when do I get to make a decision? And is this an interesting decision? Is this a good conundrum, right? So that's what you're balancing there. Great story, great engagement, great pace, awesome agency. And those are all things that you need to think about when you're crafting your interactive story. You don't have to think about that until you've got your interactive story basically mostly crafted, and then you can start moving into software. So, Inkle Writer, and I'll type it in here. Yeah, and it's free, and so it shouldn't hold you back. Now, if you want to actually learn there's mechanics behind Inkle stories. There we go. Thanks, Kate. That's awesome. So behind the software, there's always a really good framework and strategy, especially for stories, right? We know this. So if you want to learn more about how this works, see examples of excellent interactive stories, go to elearningsecrets.com. There I have an on-demand webinar. There's actually going to be a live one coming up if you have special projects that you want to bring up. I'd love that. That'd be awesome for you to show up live and interact. But also there, if this is something that you want to embrace, want to get really good at, I'd love to talk to you. So check out that webinar, see what's up, see if this resonates with you, and then at the end, if it's something that you want to get in touch with me about, then do it. All right, so I hope you found this helpful. I didn't want to leave you today without permeating your day with a little bit more interactive story goodness, and just I'm trying to, over this past 2 weeks, I've gotten quite a few messages from people who are setting up themselves for failure because they're setting up these blocks that don't really exist. And I'm trying to smash them all. I'm trying to smash all of those blocks because I don't want you to think that the status quo is going to hold you back from realizing your dream. I don't want you to think that software is going to stop you from realizing your dream of creating fulfilling, meaningful work that actually you're proud to share. And because listen, I'll get questions from people like, hey, do you think if I go freelance, I could make this much money? But I know it's not just about money. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be successful. And I don't care about the fact that you want to be successful. And at the same time, that's fine. That's great. But at the same time, I'm hoping also that you want to find work that's fulfilling for you. This isn't all about you. Yes, it's about you solving problems. But solving a problem for audiences, for people, is fulfilling work. That's when you're like, oh, I'm actually doing something of value. I'm impacting the world in a way that actually makes a difference. And it's very hard for us in this profession, especially if you're doing e-learning. I mean, think about how intangible what we do is, right? Every day. We pixel push a bunch of stuff in a digital screen. We never get to touch it. We never get to hold it. And then we put it out to people, and sometimes most of us actually never even get to hear how they did with it, if they enjoyed it, if they found it valuable. We don't see that. So for us, it's so important. It's so important that at least at that level, you feel like you're doing something good for the world, because there's nothing else in the world that is going to, like I said, we're so removed from that end user and seeing the benefit that what we've crafted. And even one of the things that is very difficult for a lot of us, and I know we all struggle with this, especially if you've been doing it for years, is that we put out projects and, everything that I know as far as me learning something is I know I learn by putting something out there, getting feedback, and then being able to improve on that piece, or being able to incorporate that feedback into my next piece. But when you're in a silo, it's so difficult, you're guessing. And so your next project, you're just like, I'm guessing again. And for me, if I know at least that I did as much as I possibly could to get the right context for somebody, to connect with somebody emotionally, to maybe stack the odds in my favor of creating a piece that engages them in some way and gets them to take the next step. If I just have those little metrics checked off and I can be proud of it, that's way more than I used to have before, when I would just launch things and just be like, oh, I hope they like it. I hated it. I wanted to poke my eyes out, but hopefully they like it. Right? Like, that's crazy. That's craziness. Like, what kind of a craftsman, craftswoman, craftsperson can you be when you're just throwing things out there and you're like, I hate it. Hopefully they don't hate it as much as I did. Like, that's just nuts, right? And that's a lot of people's reality. So what I'm hoping to do is that you realize that crafting interactive stories is a way to be creative. It's not a big shift from technologically from what we're already doing every day. But it is a mindset shift, because now you're thinking about things like emotions, persuasion, motivation, all those things that instructional design doesn't really talk about, because it's not really what we talk about, right? We talk about performance outcomes and learning outcomes and KPIs, maybe, right? So if you can get people to feel something about themselves, the future, the learning, the time they're going to invest to get better, that's really cool. And for me, that's the fulfillment that I'm looking for. And so if that resonates with you, check out that webinar. You'll learn a bit more about how I discovered this path, and then some strategies that you can apply in your work like right away to implement this strategy, and just start iterating on it, running with it, see how it feels and see if you like it. Hopefully that was helpful. Hope you guys have a fabulous rest of the day. It was wonderful to have you here. Misty, Marie, Kate, Joan, and Marie-Pierre. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful rest of the day. And talk to you very, very soon.